Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land, and welcome to another Dungeons and Discussions.
Yes.
Good morning.
How you doing, guys? Or guys and girl?
I'm not that
Guys
bad.
is gender neutral.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
true. I always thought so. Some
Yeah, it's
people
like-
get, you know,
It's like, dude.
like dude, you know. Hey, Tim. It's good to see you, bud. All right, so this is kind of a different topic for me. It's not normally one I tackle because my usual take on it is just kind of like, this is probably something you shouldn't be engaging in at the table. But it was all prompted by this particular post. I probably should have been a little bit more, you know.
Prepared.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, just by taking this guy's name out of it. But he says you cannot have a Dungeons and Dragons game unless someone in your party is using their character to work through some gender stuff. If no one in your party is coming out as trans, one of you will be chosen. Now, I assume that was kind of a jest post, but still, at the same time, it brings up a really good question about, you know, whether or not we should be using role-playing games as therapy, or whether or not we should be trying to engage in that at our tables, or if we should be, you know, getting players to work through stuff that they've got going on in their lives personally at the table. Go ahead.
I mean, if I start doing therapy with people at a Dungeons and Dragons table, I lose my license. So,
And yeah, I agree. It has to be rage bait.
I don't know if it's rage bait or if it's tongue-in-cheek, like making fun of the whole situation, maybe?
It could be.
I've
in
seen
any
almost, I've seen almost that exact tweet before, like years ago now. And they weren't being jokey or ironic. Back then, they meant it.
That is true. There was a whole section of time where people were taking, you know, gaming so seriously. You know, well, I mean, you know, and this whole thing is okay. I hate to go here, Grim. I know. This kind of leads into the whole, you know, like self-insertion for characters, and by extension, you know, the whole safety tools craze where everybody's like, oh no, don't ever bring up, you know, spiders because I have arachnophobia in real life. They're like, yeah, but does your character have arachnophobia?
Yeah.
If I'm transphobic, does that mean I can demand it not be brought up at the table?
Well, I don't know. That kind of depends on where you're gaming at and who you're gaming with. Like, you know, if I was still with my ex-girlfriend and you brought that up, that would be kind of like a, oops, well, here's my girlfriend here. But,
Sorry, it was
Yeah.
it was a terrible joke. It was a terrible joke to start with, but
yeah.
But
But,
well, no, it does make a solid point. There are things you can bring up and demand that the game be changed to accommodate, and there are other things that you can't bring up and demand that the game be changed to accommodate. And there is no particular rhyme or reason to that.
mm-hmm.
I mean,
But-
do you think that's necessarily true? Because I've always said my only safety tool is to tell people there will be no safety tools.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't usually put a disclaimer on games or anything like that, you know. But if a player lets me know that something's making them uncomfortable or that they'd really rather move on from this topic or something vocally, then I'm kind of like, okay, yeah, we can, you know, unless it's like a major plot point, you know, like, okay, in order to survive this dungeon, you must absolutely go through this entire corridor of feet, bare feet, and you know, and then Grim says, "God damn it," you know.
The most I've ever done is only ever at convention games, and then here's an age rating, and here's a brief sort of synopsis of roughly what the adventure will be about with no spoilers. And that's as far as I ever went.
See,
Yeah.
I think most people tend to look at like safety tools stuff from the perspective of running the game. I look at it as I don't want to take my players out of the immersion. So I
Mhm.
might say, okay, there are going to be no spiders in this. But if somebody wants to play a wizard with a spider familiar, or they want to use a spider as, poisonous spiders as a trap or something, I'm not going to hamstring them to say they can't creatively problem solve because somebody else has a thing about spiders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, we're not even using minis. We're like talking about it.
And when I talk about the safety tool thing too, is like there's a few thoughts that that's one way you could confront your fears, is to deal with it in a gaming situation. Like, let's take spiders again, because that seems to be a big one for a lot of people. It's like, you could confront your fear of spiders by attacking them in a game, and
Well, that's the thing. If you want to talk about it from a therapeutic point of view, avoiding subjects is the one thing that any good therapist will tell you not to do.
Mhm.
And if you're uncomfortable with something, they're going to tell you suck it up.
Mhm.
If you have an actual phobia, they're going to tell you that the best way to go about it is to do things like sit and think about spiders, and then be around a stuffed spider. It's not going to be avoid everything that has to do with spiders. Because if you have social anxiety and you avoid it, all that's going to happen is you're going to become agoraphobic eventually. Like, phobias get worse if you don't confront them.
Yeah. And this is kind of blends into the rant that I did on Saturday. Because Saturday morning I was talking about how we're using technology more and more to disassociate ourselves from other people, especially the unpleasant parts that we don't want to have to deal with, like telling somebody that they're fired or having to deal with an irate customer or whatever. It's almost becoming the same thing with gaming and safety tools. It's like people just want to avoid all the unpleasant parts of gaming.
I just want to get to the part where I win.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's. I mean, and it's not just TTRPGs too. It's video games too, because it's like we've got journalists out there who are saying that there needs to be an easy mode for journalists in order to beat the games. Which
I mean, there's a ghost of a point there, in that if you're a games journalist, you really should play through the whole game before you write a review.
Mhm.
And you're often under time pressure and being asked to review lots of different games. So there's a ghost of a point there, in that it should be perhaps easier for them to get to the end in good order.
Yeah, I mean, the two issues there, though, are that, number one, I think most of the time they only play about the first 20 minutes.
True.
And second of all, that's our fault. We're the ones who decided that instead of YouTubers reviewing a movie, when the DVD comes out, we want it reviewed the day before it hits the theaters. And we want games reviewed the day they're released, as opposed to actually giving people time to properly play and properly review. That is on the viewers as much as it is the companies. The companies are just trying to meet the needs that we're demanding.
Well, I mean, I got Atomic Heart the other day, which is a game I've been kind of wanting to play for a long time, but it was kind of expensive and reviews were all over the place on it. Well, they finally dropped it to a cheap enough price that I thought, just go ahead and snag it now. And I noticed that it has a whole bunch of options in it for accessibility, which is kind of how the games are going these days. I mean, I do appreciate these accessibility options for things like, colorblind and deafness and all this kind of stuff to make games more accessible to everybody. That's just good practice. But there's also things in there too, like skip puzzles or automatically solve puzzles is one of the accessibility options. And this game has a lot of puzzles, and I started thinking, well, damn, that takes about half your game challenge away right there, because you don't have to deal with the puzzles. I mean, I don't particularly like puzzles in my games. I find them annoying and time wasting because it's just kind of like, oh, look, you gated content behind another damn puzzle and I can't get there until I jump through all the hoops to solve the puzzle.
Well,
Yeah.
but I assume then you just find a different type of game that you want to play.
Well, no, not necessarily, because it's like at that point, usually I'm pretty engaged with the story. I want to see how it goes. I want to play through it and see all the other cool stuff. So I'm just kind of like, I'm forced to have to contend with this. It was like, the first time I played Resident Evil back on the PS1. Man, the game is so solid. It's horrifying and everything else. I mean, yes, it looks dated now, but back then that was like awesome graphics. And yet it was full of puzzles that you had to solve. And some of them you couldn't solve right away. You had to wait until later on in the game for a solution to present itself. Sorry.
Oh, I forget sometimes that people get engaged in the actual storyline of games. I'm just goal driven. I just want to get to the end.
There was a time I was like that, but
There's a reason I don't play many video games.
I have kind of embraced the whole Japanese concept that it is not the ending that is important; it is the journey. So, but
I remember. I remember during Gamergate, one of the BioWare writers came out and expressed the wish that there was a way to skip all of the gameplay and combat stuff and just get to the cutscenes and decision points. And I was just like, well, that's a visual novel. That's not that's not what you make.
Well,
yep.
And I'm confused. How do you make decisions if you've skipped everything that came before?
Right.
Well, there are instances where you didn't necessarily have to fight your way there and could make the decisions, like Dragon Age Origins, which I'm still upholding is probably one of the best RPG games ever made. Ever. Yeah, there's a lot of talking in it, and there's a lot of lore buildup and everything else. But the truth is, do you really have to fight through all those frickin' Darkspawn in order to get to the Mother, which is like one of the worst boss fights in the entire game, and survive that just so you can get to the next plot point? It's kind of like, boy, I sure wish I could skip this combat because this combat sucks.
Is some of this a generational thing, do you think? Because the sort of language of mental health and various sort of critical theory stances and so on is now something that people younger than us use it all the time, right? And they're all hyper aware of mental illnesses and neurodiversity and all the rest of it. And so they use the language of mental health and sort of medicalized perspective. They use that all the time. So I think there's a confusion between therapy and therapeutic, right?
Right.
So, you go to therapy, but there might be other things you do that are therapeutic, but they're not therapy. Like, I go on stupid walks for my stupid mental and physical health, right? That's therapeutic, but it's not a therapy. And similarly, sitting at the table playing games with your friends is a time to relax and socialize and let your hair down, all the rest of it. So it can be therapeutic. It can make you feel better. It can add value to your life, but it's not therapy.
No.
But it's being treated like it because these kids and young adults see everything through that lens.
The problem is, okay, so when I was an undergrad, the very first class I took, the professor taught me the most important thing I ever learned in my entire career. And what he said was, keep in mind that when you leave this class, you will know just enough to be dangerous, and you really won't know anything. That, we can teach you stuff in books. We can say that, most people do X. We can give you, vague guidelines for what things look like. But that's not the same as experience. And what these, I guess if we're going to call them kids, what these kids and young people are doing is not just looking at books or labels or diagnoses. They're looking at Facebook and the little tests that say, take this quiz to find out if you're neurodivergent. They're saying, if you have these symptoms, maybe you're depressed. If you have, do this, it's a sign of autism. They're self-diagnosing off Facebook
Mm-hmm.
and social media and Twitter and whatever the latest little quiz site is. And these things are no longer concerns to be worked through. They're like badges that they wear with honor and use as defenses against ever improving.
Hmm.
You can't make me show up for things on time because I'm neurodivergent and I don't have a, I'm what is the term? Time blind? Is that the
Yeah, something
time
like that.
blindness? I think there's a thing on that. You can't expect me to do, I don't know, whatever the other thing is, because I have social. Oh, you can't expect me to work in the office because I have social anxiety.
Yeah. Or I have time blindness.
Yeah. So these are becoming defenses to hide behind to avoid the things. I mean, it used to be, it's not like learning disabilities and autism and the rest of it aren't real things, but they used to be things you got skills to work around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Here's how you cope. I'm incredibly short. I have to get stools to get anything off even the first shelf in my cabinets in the kitchen. I adapt and I work around it. I don't say, hey, no one can ever put anything on the top shelf because I won't be able to reach it.
Yeah. Simple.
And I don't know. I find all of this, it's gone past frustrating. I mean, we are actively encouraging people to stay victims and to stay clients. And this is actively, I mean, there are actively policies in place in the mental health system to keep people from getting better, because then you lose clients and you lose money.
That's we're kind of veering off into a whole different.
Oh, like I said, I have so many things to say about the mental health system, but it's added to when you encourage these types of things, like, even your social activities with untrained friends should be even therapeutic. I mean, expecting your friends or strangers, even worse, to be responsible for your mental health care is incredibly dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to move in that direction because we want everybody to be sick.
Well, the other part of it seems to be too that the younger generations can't seem to figure out how to do things on their own. It's like, I've had younger people working for me, and they can't figure out how to put all this stuff up on a desk or something because they've got their arms full of stuff. And I'm just like, okay, you need to set that down over there, then stack the smaller stuff there, and then put the and I have to literally explain to them how to stack it up because they can't figure out how to put it all up there without knocking it all off the desk. I'm just kind of, are you kidding me right now?
Problem solving is not a great skill. But again, it's my generation that raised kids like that. It's my generation that's responsible for helicopter parenting their children and just saying, oh, let me just do that for you.
True.
Yeah. Gen X was it's a stereotype, but it's somewhat true. But Gen X was so neglected, I think, that they overcompensated the other way.
I think so. And I'm Gen X. So.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about ourselves with pride about how, we learned to take care of ourselves I was babysitting other people's children by the time I was 12.
I was cooking
Um,
ramen noodles when I was 9. So
Yeah, exactly. I was doing dishes when I still had to drag a chair over in order to, get into the sink. I was doing my own laundry by the time I was 10.
I was
Um,
lighting our gas stove in our trailer house when I was a kid.
But-
So
but we say these things with pride, but then we raised our children to be utterly dependent and never grow up. And
yeah,
it boggles my mind.
It's
Oh, and-
interesting to have you here as a former mental health care professional, and me having been through the mental health care system, albeit in a different country. We kind of
me
get
just
both.
being mental.
Yeah, we kind of get both sides of the perspective. It's a bit different here because the money motive isn't quite so rampant. But we have a different problem in that mental health care is expensive, takes a very long time, often doesn't have a lot of very measurable results, so it doesn't look good for the government to pour a lot of money into a hole that never seems to get filled. So we tend to get one size fits all, oversubscribed treatments and things that aren't good for a lot of people. So
Well, I mean, the issue is the money. Companies don't care about the money so much because honestly, there are so many people who are have mental health issues that you're never going to run out of clients. If you graduate one, there's always going to be another one. The problem is what they want are easy clients. So the clients who always show up on time, who don't cause problems, you want to keep them in the system so that when the state comes calling and says, "Hey, here's this really violent patient. We'd like you take them into your program." You want to be able to say, "Oh, sorry, we're full up. We don't have any beds. We don't have any case managers. We're overfull." I mean, sometimes you do get for-profit companies that go really crazy. I mean, so I am also a licensed substance use counselor. And the last company I worked for as a substance use counselor, we were supposed to have 25 clients. You could get a waiver to go over that temporarily. But due to shortages and terrible hours and varying other things, and a huge number of clientele, they didn't want to turn anyone away. I ended up with a caseload of 75 people by the time I got done. And over half of them legally had to be seen weekly for an hour apiece. We couldn't go over a 40-hour work week. And I had 75 clients.
Mhm.
Like, those are literally impossible numbers.
Oh yeah.
But it's a balancing act between we don't want to turn everyone away and there aren't enough services, and the other companies who want to keep the easy people so that they can turn people away. And this is how you end up with people thinking they have to do their therapy in role-playing games because there are no services otherwise.
I mean, yeah, it's a nice way to bring it back around. I think actually Magnificent Devil kind of hit it on the head, which once again, I'm really glad I got him in my audience, man. Dude, you're like a gem. Seriously. You ever want to come on here, let me know. But he says, yeah, people use therapy when they mean catharsis. I think that's exactly what it is. People feel powerless in their day-to-day lives to affect change of any sort. We can't arm ourselves to the teeth with weaponry and go out and change the world single-handedly, because we'll get murderized, and we'll get jailed, or we'll get put in the funny farm or whatever. It's just
Vigilantism is frowned on.
Yeah, it is. It is. We just can't do it successfully. It's not like the movies. It's not like the comic books or anything else. We literally can't do it. We've got spy satellites that can read the date on a dime sitting on a beach. We've got cameras everywhere. We've got all kinds of stuff out there. So it's kind of like you want to do something, you're not going to get away with it for long.
The problem is that we're not very good about doing the things we can do anyway, because
this is also true.
They might inconvenience us. And when it comes right down to it, people will talk about how much they, don't like the state of the world today. But then you suggest that they do something to try and fix it, and I don't have time for that. I have
Yeah.
6 hours a day to be on my phone, but I don't have and complain about it, but I don't have time to actually do anything.
Well, people don't want to sacrifice in order to make things happen. And I understand it. I mean, because it's hard. It's much more easy to be living a life of comfort. And the role-playing game also represents a comfortable way to kind of get that cathartic release, from whatever it is that's bugging you. It's like, okay, I had a shitty week at work. I just want to jump into a game here at the end of the week and play my barbarian and just, hack the shit out of some orcs or whatever for a couple of hours.
I think it's fine to work through stuff using games as a medium to do so, or to examine whatever it is. I mean, like you say, you have a shitty day at work. Maybe you come home, meet up with your friends, play D&D or whatever. Other games are available, and you get some kind of release and relaxation from totally murderizing a bunch of goblins in gratuitous ways. In the same way, someone else might work out that stress by screaming into a pillow, or
or firing up a video game,
or video game punching bag, or whatever. These are just different. Right, so we were talking earlier about coping tools, right? Which is what we learned how to be resilient with. Mm-hmm. That's more what these things should be. Coping tools and valve mechanisms, I think. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was going to say, I wonder too, there was a study once where they suggested that if you have a large goal, like say you want to start exercising and lose X number of pounds, that people that posted it on social media were actually less likely to be successful because they got so much praise from the goal that it tricks your brain into thinking, oh, I feel good, I've already met the goal. So there was no like pleasure feedback from doing the goal because you already got it. I wonder too, if you go into a game where, somebody's going to come out as trans in the game, do you get the same sense of, I supported a cause I believe in, even though it was in a fake world? And does that make you less likely to go out and do something in the real world because you feel like you've already done it?
Yeah. It's anecdotal, but I've kind of seen this myself, in that a lot of my really harsh critics are fully right on online. Like, they will police your language, but have they actually done anything in real life? Usually when I go and look, they haven't. And meanwhile, I have raised money to help people with their gender affirming surgery. I have raised money for a trans man who needed a new wheelchair. I have gone out of my way to employ people in these kind of situations, which can sometimes be difficult, to help them raise money. Yeah, I've done the Marxist thing and improved their material conditions, while these people just police language and have their pronouns on their bio. They're not actually doing anything. I'm not saying that to be boastful, but it's just they're not really doing anything.
Well, that's kind of what I meant. Is, I mean, we already know that people who spend a lot of time on social media, virtue signaling, tend to not do very much in person. And I wonder if encouraging this, do your social actions with your role-playing group that already probably support what you're doing anyway, if that has a similar effect, that you feel like you're virtue signaling and you've proven to everyone how good and moral you are, and therefore you don't really need to do anything in real life.
It can get into some weird areas there. I do have a friend who initially judged people by how they acted in role playing, which is kind of like, you should never do that, but he does. And I think he admitted to me once that that I was kind of he was kind of worried about me because of my behavior in the role playing situation. Was like, well, you're supposed to be playing yourself, and I'm just like, okay,
No,
but
that's exactly
it's a
the opposite of what
character.
you do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I-
to be fair, I do have certain opinions if someone shows up and tells me they want to be a cat person.
Yeah, that's
Not entirely unfounded. We used to play a lot of werewolf and werewolf LARPs, and there's a lot of closet furries were working through some stuff by playing those
Ooh.
characters. So
well. I mean, and that's another role playing game that you can also throw in there as a kind of a release valve is Vampire the Masquerade, because it's like now you're not a victim, you're a predator. You're literally a predator, and you have all these different powers and stuff at your command, but you've also got a structure that you've got to deal with, and maybe you can't get the job posting that you want in life, but in Vampire the Masquerade, if you play your cards right and you get a good group of people willing to work with you to attain that goal, you could become like an Archon or a Prince or something else, I mean, it'll be hard. It would take work. It would be something that you shouldn't get overnight, but you can work towards attaining that goal. Of course, these days, with the way the kids are, it's kind of like they expect to either start the game as the prince or
Yeah.
or be able to attain the prince by the end of the gaming session. Well, it's the end of the gaming session. How come I'm not prince yet?
Because there are 7 of you and you can't all be princes.
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
There's only one prince of the city. Yeah. We'll just make a new council. We'll all be princes and princesses.
But it's interesting because then you take it one step further, and I, of course, talk a lot to people that design games. And there was one person who decided they did not like the lack of consent that exists in Vampire. So they made a vampire game where no one was allowed to do anything unless they had complete and utter consent from the humans around them. So,
oh boy. Okay. I bet that made for a really hard game.
I don't know. I don't think it is something that I would be interested in playing.
I don't see how it could last longer than one session, because it's like, the first time you want to go out and feed on somebody, hey, are you willing to be fed upon?
Well, I don't think he realized, but what he's basically done is turned vampires into indentured servants. Like I have to consistently serve the humans so that I can eat.
Yeah, but that also knocks down a whole bunch of your vampiric powers too. Like dominate would be like the first one, and be like, oh, you can't use dominate. Why? Because he wasn't willing. But domination is like you don't want a willing person.
I can see where the idea could come from. The whole idea that vampires need to be invited to enter your house. That's a consent thing, and then building out from that, you could do something with that. I just don't see how it's playable or interesting.
Well, there's
actually a vampire clan that does have to have consent in order to feed, and that's the Salubri. They can't feed from an unwilling victim. So it's kind of like, either unless you're dominating them, unless you've picked up points and dominate and want to do that, which does that still make them unwilling? It's kind of like an arguable point, but you kind of have to finesse and charm your way into getting what you want. So
yeah, I just was thinking that if you start out playing vampire because you feel like a victim in your real life and
Blood Solicitor the Masquerade.
But if if you're playing vampire because you want to feel like you have more control over your life and you don't find that control, it does seem like the next logical step is invent a game where everyone has to do the things you think they should do.
Yeah.
Of course, you can't make them play, but
that almost sounds like paranoia. The computer says you must do this. However, this person in your group is also.
Yeah.
Well, the computer's insane, so you can bullshit the computer.
Can I just address what Kit said earlier before it scrolls all the way away?
But-
So yeah, that is a problem, and that was out in force during the recent campaigning around the personal independence payment and welfare reform bills here in the UK. There is a danger of being too dismissive of people, because it's not that there's a higher prevalence of a lot of these conditions, but we have gotten better at diagnosing them and catching them. So to some degree, there are more neurodivergent and mentally unwell people around. It's just that we're actually recognizing it and trying to do something about it. But there's a danger in all of this self-diagnosis and so on as well, that it ends up devaluing the claim or the pathology that you happen to be suffering from.
Yeah. Let me.
And
I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
No, nearly done. In a similar way to the way in which positive discrimination in hiring and things has made everyone very suspicious of anyone different who gets into a position of power in a corporation. In a similar way, this extends suspicion onto anyone who might genuinely be ill and all the rest of it, because it's been so devalued, and so yeah, it makes me uncomfortable to dismiss it all and just say, kids today all think they have ADHD. So we should be cautious of that, but recognize also that it does create a problem for the people who genuinely are ill. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I apologize. I think I'm lagging a little bit because I just realized your voice and your mouth are not syncing. So I apologize. It's probably my end. Yeah, so I want to clarify. I was not saying, everyone just needs to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. What I'm saying is that in the mental health field, we have moved away from here's how we help you live a full and happy life in society to here's how we kind of keep you in the therapy for the rest of your life. When you've got, or even if it's not therapy, I mean, people who've been on medications for 30 years for mental health disorders and never had therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So all they have is this dependence to a medication, which will eventually wear off. So I'm not saying we need to bootstraps everything. I'm saying what we need is a mental health system that actually cares about people getting better, and doesn't encourage this use of labels as an avoidance tactic. Like, I don't think most people in a wheelchair, if they were suddenly given the ability to walk again, would say no. But in the mental health field, there's a whole lot of first of all, you can't lose your label. Like, even if you stop having symptoms completely, you cannot lose that label. And it affects how people treat you. And I think it's gotten to the point where it affects how people look at themselves. I, many, many years ago, suffered a very severe injury at work. So I used to work entirely with clients who were violent and unmedicated. And the result is I went to the ER a lot. Because, like I said, I'm not very big. And during one of those, I suffered a fairly severe back injury to the point where there were days I couldn't walk. But I still had to go to work. So this didn't line up very well. And so I was in agony all the time. I couldn't sleep. So, it gets hard to emotionally regulate when you're really low on sleep. And my doctor diagnosed me with depression and wanted to put me on meds. And I said, I'm not depressed. There is a specific situation that needs to be dealt with, and then I will feel better. That is not depression.
Yeah.
That is a life circumstance I'm working through. And sure enough, as soon as I finally managed to get into a physical therapist and get my back taken care of, I felt fine. But 30 years later, my chart still says I suffer from depression.
Hmm.
And it's really hard to get doctors to listen to me about other things because my chart says, oh, you're just depressed.
Yeah.
No, I'm not depressed. I was never depressed. I had 12 out of, or some ridiculous number, I can't even remember at this point. It was like 10 or 12 like vertebrae that were just completely gone. And I was in pain. Like,
Yeah.
that's not depression. That's a physical issue.
Similar thing happened to a friend of mine who worked as a prison guard in the States. Completely shattered whole sections of his spine when some prisoners turned on him. And yeah, very, very similar. He's still struggling with addiction from the painkillers. So that's that's another side of that that's not a huge amount of fun.
Yeah. Well, and that was the other thing was the job I was doing, I couldn't take anything, stronger than ibuprofen because I couldn't go to work on. I am a real lightweight when it comes to any medications. I mean, if and I'm just plain old a lightweight.
You're a goat. You're a little goat. So
I they would give me the smallest dose of Percocet they could, and I would cut them in half, and I would still be completely out of my mind for like 6 hours.
Yeah.
You can't work a double shift on that.
I got some chat stuff here I need to address. So Archer says, yeah, you're playing Vampire the Bloodlines? Good deal. First one is awesome. The second one, if it ever shows up, I guarantee you it's not going to be as good. So just enjoy the first one because it's as good as it's going to get. And don't be a dumbass like me and spend $80 on it 5 years before it releases. Anyway. Okay. This is something I've heard more than once, Mephisto, and that's the deal is our detection methods have gotten better. It's not like people didn't suffer from this stuff way back in the day. It's just our detection methods for finding this stuff out in people have gotten better and our diagnosis has gotten better.
That's part of it. That is not all of it.
I think another part of it is we're aware of the world and news abroad, and news is almost always bad. And we're constantly bombarded with that stuff. So in many ways, becoming depressed or edgy or anxious is a perfectly cromulent response to the state of the world. It makes sense to respond that way.
And it's all things we can't control, which I mean, if you look at like military PTSD, they've discovered that the people who are most likely to suffer it are not people who were in combat. Because when you have a gun and you're shooting back, you feel like you have some control over your situation. It's the people who are on the sidelines who are in danger but don't feel like they can do anything. Or they're seeing danger, but they don't feel like they can do anything.
Or the guy who next to them gets blown up in front of their face and they couldn't do anything about it.
Right.
I have a friend who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder because he was a camp guard and a shell hit nearby where they were guarding a bunch of prisoners and blew them all up right in front of him. And so now, the prisoners wore yellow jumpsuits. Anytime he sees the color yellow, it triggers his PTSD. But, the other part of it too is the fact that since we've become more aware of these mental health issues, we're also like reverse diagnosing historical figures. Like I think somebody was looking like Charles the 11th and saying, "Oh, well, he may have been autistic because of his behavior." And just kind of like, okay, well, what.
Yeah, I do want to say, I appreciate that, Kit. I think it's a pendulum thing. Like we someday need to learn for the pendulum to settle nicely in the middle, but we don't seem to be very good at that. Yeah.
I think there's a tendency looking back to assume that people didn't have these problems. I think it's more that they had more pressing problems like the plague or being in a war and so on. Like two things can be bad at the same time. You know, like dying at 30 from a toothache is bad. So is being clinically depressed, right? But you may not have lived long enough to get depressed in the previous era. So that might be part of it. It's like you can say, "Oh, why is there all this senility and Alzheimer's and cancer?" Well, because people are living longer, right? So
Yeah.
we encounter it more. We see more of it. We are able to diagnose it. That's part of it as well.
You know,
Shouldn't dismiss it.
I was actually wondering this yesterday. If you take out infant mortality, are we living longer? Because all of my older relatives lived crazy long periods of time.
Not mine.
And
we all tend to die off at 80 seems to be our cutoff point.
I mean, but that is considered above the average, though. Like significantly.
So I researched this when I was putting Whitechester together and trying to figure out lifespans. And child mortality is a big factor, but there are also like cutoff points. If you make it to a certain age, you are very likely to live a very long life because all these other things will have taken you out before then. I can't remember what it was. It might have been 60. Like if you make it to 60 or your mid 60s, then you're almost certainly going to make it to your mid 80s or 90. Everyone else will have died off from complications beforehand. And a lot of the reason for it is genetic proclivities, because provided you've lived long enough to have kids, that doesn't screen out any of those later problems that you might develop because you've already had kids. So evolution doesn't factor in there. I'll see if I can find those studies.
I was thinking that, when people had a ton of kids and they all died really young, first of all, that's going to make the average age of survival look much lower. But second of all, if you're a kid born with, I don't know, severe asthma before there's asthma medication, the kid with asthma is the one that's going to die off and not pass those genetics along. But my grandmother had 4 sisters. The youngest death was 89. My grandmother and one other sister lived to 96. And it just, granted, personal experience is terrible statistics. But it did kind of get me wondering if the reason we think we're living longer actually has more to do with infant mortality than anything else.
My village was thought to be some sort of mystical reason, but people here had a reputation for living a really long time. So in the Victorian era, a bunch of Victorian scientists came down and tried to figure out why this was. And what they eventually figured out was that our water here is really pure. It comes out of chalk aquifers, which means the water is clean and clear and good enough for raising watercress, which has been an industry here for a very long time. So that's part of it. People weren't drinking bad water. And also the chalk meant that all the water people were drinking was really high in calcium. So women specifically weren't suffering as much with osteoporosis and similar issues because they had such a high calcium intake. So it's weird little things like that.
All right, let me steer this back on topic for a minute and with a segue. There we go.
Chainsaw Man, right?
Chainsaw Man. The scene in the manga is not nearly as graphic as it is in the cartoon, but the cartoon is so good. Anyway, all right. So the real topic is whether or not we should be, or using games as a form of therapy, as a form of catharsis, as a form of working out. shit going on in your life that's not working right, or just, you know, whatever, you know. And like I said, it expands to include things like safety tools where people, you know, don't want to deal with shit that bothers them, so they throw up the whole X card thing is, oh, you can't do that, you need to change the scene. But it also melds into something that we had a guest bring up, which is our dear friend Full Metal Dragon. I love you, man. I would say that the younger people who have grown up only knowing the digital age and immediate gratification of having constant internet access has also been a contributing factor. And I would agree, because it's like, again, this kind of goes back to that whole, can we skip all the parts I don't like and just go straight on to the parts that I do? And I'm pretty sure everybody who's played a role-playing game has probably experienced that part, that whole, okay, I'll give myself as a first example. The shopping trip RPs. I hate shopping trip RPs with a just absolute blue passion, because it is the most drag-ass, boring. It's kind of like, all I want to do is look in the equipment manual, you know, mark the gold off my sheet and say, okay, I picked up some shit. We're done. Let's go get back into the dungeon. Let's go get back to adventuring or something else. But no, everybody else wants to go and make a run. Let's go and check out this. Let's go look at here. I need to bargain. I want to do this, and my phone is ringing. You guys talk while that happens.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that two of the other problems are that we spend too much time sitting. We spend far more time sitting than any previous generation, which makes you more depressed or more likely to be depressed. It's something like 10 minutes of really intense cardio at the beginning of the day will improve your mood, your energy level, and something else for the rest of the day. I can't remember what it is, but because we're not getting that, we're more depressed. And the other thing is that the relationship with screens is kind of important. I mean, there's some tentative studies that early electronics usage makes kids dumber, because not dumber as in they don't have access to information, but they don't problem solve as well because they can just look things up, and they don't remember. They don't memorize as well because they can just look things up.
No, it's true. Because it's like, without that extra couple of steps that you usually take, as in having to go find the book, research the book, and then read the book, the information doesn't imprint itself so much, because now you don't have context to recall that information.
These kids today with their printed word, I blame that Gutenberg. He's got everywhere. Nobody remembers anything anymore. Yeah. What's going to happen to our rich oral traditions when you can just read it out of a book?
Back in our day, if you couldn't remember stuff, you got whacked over the head.
Well, but I mean, it doesn't fit the way our world works anymore. But the fact is that, I mean, try getting someone to recite a story with an oral tradition. You can't do it.
Yeah. No, I'm being somewhat facetious. It's just, I always think it's worth reminding ourselves that every invention gets treated this way.
True.
Well, but I'm not.
No, I know.
We're just talking about it from a mental health perspective.
Yeah.
And there are some tentative studies that show that early use of electronics leads to an increased chance of substance use later in life.
Oh,
because your brain is so addicted to not
dopamine,
not the instant gratification, but the constant stimuli, that it basically develops around that need for stimuli. And by the time you hit your late teens, early 20s, you need more of it. And so not that, kids with early electronics are going to use drugs, but that there is an increased chance.
No, I mean, we do. Our drug culture is pretty robust these days.
There's also... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it could be working the other way, like that this is flushing out people with addictive personalities early. because they become addicted to electronics. And then that's confirmed later on with the drug addiction, that they may have been more likely to develop drug addiction or alcoholism or whatever later on. So it's possible that it's kind of turning up the people with that tendency.
Well, but we've known for years that the early use of anything mind altering, whether it's electronics or whatever, makes you more likely to develop an addictive tendency. So if you can drink like an alcoholic starting at 30, and you're probably not going to get dependent because you have your own personality, your brain is fully formed. But if you start, drinking a bottle of Jack a day at 15, you're in a lot more trouble.
Yeah.
And it's the other thing is that it's a question as to whether or not it's the electronics directly, because we've known for a very long time. Let's see if I can remember the statistics on this. Children who or people whose parents reported that at the age of 5 had trouble sleeping had an increased chance of law enforcement interaction by the time they were 30. Because if you don't sleep well as a kid, you don't learn to sleep well. Again, lack of sleep leads to terrible emotional regulation. You make bad decisions, and you are more likely to end up in trouble with the law because of it. You're more likely to use stimulants and depressants to try and regulate yourself.
Oh, you mean me and my tons of caffeine and the fact that I make poor decisions, like usually emotional based, that destroy my bank account? Yeah.
I mean, I was going to go for more like, cocaine and fentanyl, but
no, I never picked up addictions to anything like that, just because it was kind of like, for me, it was always a financial thing, because it was like the choice was just like, okay, let's see, I got $10. I could either go buy some MJ or something from a friend and get a temporary high, or I could buy all these comic books. So for me, it was the comic books, and that's why my house is just like falling down in books.
But I mean, when teenagers who are in treatment for substance use, they have discovered, they used to think like people who, kids who were doing drugs didn't sleep well because they were doing drugs. What they've actually discovered is that kids who are doing drugs probably weren't sleeping already and are using the drugs to self-medicate. And if you treat them for a sleep disorder at the same time you are treating them for substance use, they are twice as likely to still be sober the next year.
Huh.
It's interesting how all of these things might come together in a sort of cumulative, interlinked fashion. Like there are studies that link messed up natural circadian rhythms to depression. So, so people with depression, it may be a neurodivergent trait that a lot of people with depression happen to prefer to be up at night and to sleep during the day. That just may be the way their bodies are wired. And so they might turn to substances in order to regulate, to meet society's requirements for you to be awake and active or asleep at the right times. And then, that can turn into substance abuse, or you can find yourself doom scrolling late at night just because you can't sleep and you need something to occupy your brain, or you ruminate. Definitely. And all of these things interrelate. It's interesting.
Well, yeah, that's kind of where I was.
This back to TTRPGs, though.
I was actually going to do that. Okay. Well, except I was going to do video games. People who play a lot of video games very frequently will be like, I just need to do one more level. And so they don't go to bed. They don't get 8 hours, especially if they're kids. They have to be
called out.
They have to be up at a certain time for school or for work. And so they have this chronic sleep deprivation, which may also lead to mental health and substance use issues. All of this stuff is so interconnected, and to act like there's a really easy answer is probably not great, which is why expecting people who don't know any of that to solve the fact that, I mean, people can, if I go to a gaming table and I'm anxious, they can empathize, they can, encourage me to speak more, they can make me feel welcome. But for them to expect them to fix it or to adapt everything to my issue is unfair. I mean, doctors can't figure this stuff out. It is unfair to expect a bunch of people sitting around a gaming table to do that.
Yeah. Or a game creator to anticipate every possible problem that someone might have with the world you've created and
Right.
baby-proof it.
Right.
Sorry.
Exactly. It's your job to be responsible for understanding your own limitations and just not play that game. Don't pick that game up. If you read the back and discover it's a horror game about, body horror, and that creeps you out, don't play it. Or even better, do play it. And
Well, okay,
and get some resilience.
yeah.
And then again, this also jumps right back to TTRPGs because it's a case of you don't always necessarily know what the GM is going to be cooking up. I mean, like if they're using a module or something and they let you know ahead of time, it's like, hey, we're going to play through the Queen of the Demon Web Pits modules. It's kind of like, there's going to be spiders in it. So it's kind of like, and if that's your deal, you don't like spiders in description or whatever, it's kind of like, okay, that's probably your chance to pass. But most of us, it's like, Grim doesn't tell us ahead of time what we're going to be facing in Fabula Ultima or any other game. Yeah, and I don't tell people what they're going to be facing ahead of time in whatever game I'm running. It's like while I was running Darwin's World, they ran into all kinds of shit. They ran into zombies. They ran into all kinds of mutants and all kinds of everything else. And it's like, and if you don't like body horror, facing down an army of 10-foot tall giants with like fingers and eyes and shit coming out of places that shouldn't be. That's kind of creepy, especially when they're shooting at you. But that's the thing. It's like, for an experienced GM who knows his players and has been playing with them for a while, he can kind of figure out where their limitations are and kind of the things that they like and what to tap into. But, the real cautionary tale comes whenever you're doing like a pickup game or worse, you're trying to run something at a con. You could not pay me to run a game at a con because the con rules usually are a case of you have to accept anybody who wants to play and you have to run the scenario as written and you have to list out all the stuff in the scenario as you have it written. And even that's not good enough because as Grim will tell you about, and Grim, I actually expect you to remember this, the guy at UK Games Expo who got booted, permanently banned because he ran something that was edgy, even though he had warnings up about it.
Oh, it's worse than that. It had full warnings, an 18 certificate, and what the whole case hinged on was the fact that the players misinterpreted something that he put in the game in the worst possible way. So, and the con rules that were that you go with the people making the accusations, pretty much, which is not a way to run anything.
No,
I feel like getting banned from that type of convention is like getting blocked by certain people on Twitter. It's really a win.
Well, this was UK Games Expo, which is the biggest convention now that takes place in the UK. So it was a bit of a blow for a guy who was a well-liked GM and known convention presence up until that point.
SSRI prescription. I don't know about that. But
Meds work for me, so I would caution people about being too cautious about them. They can help people.
They help certain people very, very well. But I mean, there was a huge Time article 15 years ago about the fact that they discovered that, Prozac had faked most of their studies to get approved and that in fact it only worked on a very small percentage of people.
Oh, that's okay. We should go back to old 7-Up that had lithium in it, but because it did.
What makes it fizz.
Yes.
Having once had a patient who almost died on lithium toxicity, I think I'm okay with.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it's better than Coca-Cola, cocaine. But...
I mean, I'm sure the cocaine addicts would disagree with you.
I'm sure they would, but you want something that's going to give you a little pep and a little bit of some pain tolerance. Yeah, that'll have some Coca-Cola.
Somebody told me the other day they're like weed is medicine, and I was like, yeah, pretty much every drug we now recognize as being addictive started out as getting
I mean,
as a medicine.
That's true, but
you use it in the wrong way or you use too much of it, anything goes from being a medicine to being a drug really fast.
People keep dragging this back into medical stuff, and I'm just kind of trying. Can we keep this on games?
Well, can you bring up that original tweet again, please?
Yes, I will. That would be good.
I don't know how much longer you want to go, but I've got another angle on this.
All right. So once again, it's like, yes, you cannot have a Dungeons and Dragons game or any other game unless someone in your party is using their character to work through some gender stuff. If no one in your party is coming out as trans, one of you will be chosen. Now, I do kind of think that's a little tongue-in-cheeky. I don't necessarily think the guy meant this to be a truism, but considering the number of flakes out there in the gaming space who do try to use games as their source of, beating the drumhead for whatever cause they want to champion that week, whether it be trans activism or feminism or I don't know, every plate having a lobster on it, whatever.
Plate.
Every single plate, yes. In this kingdom, we only serve lobster. We don't touch the plants. We just serve lobsters.
Every platelet in your bloodstream, tiny lobster.
Yeah.
So what I was going to say is, the other side of that is, just because I decide to play a female character or a character of a different race or whatever, I don't want it to be assumed that I'm working through some gender issues or whatever other issue that character could be misconstrued as representing. Maybe I just want to play something different, experience the other. And so that's the other danger here of people making assumptions about why you're playing your character.
Now, we do have a friend who games with us regularly who, they were cis male when they started gaming with us a few years ago, off and on, and have since started transitioning. But I think even back when they were male, they were playing female characters, if I'm not mistaken. And they still play them now. And I'm just kind of like, okay, well, it wouldn't be a big deal to me either way. It doesn't matter what their actual real gender is in this world. It matters what it is in the other world, though, possibly, depending on the situation, Yeah, I don't guess it really needs to be stated, but, female PCs have particular problems in most settings that, male ones don't. I mean, unless, of course, you're going to Planet of the Amazons, in which case the roles are all reversed.
Death by
Snoo.
I ran a game. Well, I ran the kind of demo version of a game last weekend. I've lost track of time. And one of the PCs, it's 5e based, but it takes place in like historical Italy.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of modding of the game for that. But one of the PCs was based on an actual courtesan, who was basically the Western version of a geisha, and had, lots of interaction with high officials and had lots of information and
a courtier.
And well, but she I can't remember what the term was. It was a special status even for that. Like, she spent as much time, like, she had numerous books of poetry published. She was asked to court to sing and to read her poetry. She played multiple instruments. So it was, yes, she slept with people, but that was kind of secondary to all these other talents she had.
Yeah, I get it.
And she used all that power and information. She's considered to be one of the world's first feminists because she used all that power and information to basically do things like fund education for women.
I don't know.
So
I think Boudica would enter the chat at that point.
I said one of. Um, but there are ways to do games, even fanciful games that are slightly more equal, even if the worlds they're in might not be. I mean,
I don't know. I mean, you have to ask Grim about this one since he wrote the gore game, but I don't think I'd want to play a girl in that one.
I think that's an exception, but even
True.
there, even
I mean,
there, Free Women.
unless you're into that sort,
Well,
you're into that sort of thing.
I mean, well, yeah, but that's like a whole different type of therapy. Okay, well, just exercise your kink in our game, no problem. But
yeah.
Mal says, I never play female characters as a player, but I have no problem running them as a GM. As a player, I don't identify. Well, that's the thing. You don't have to identify with them. It's like, if I play a female character, I don't have to identify with her. It's like, it's like, okay, it's a female character. It's just like, it's a suit. You're just putting a suit on, and it just happens to have boobies.
Yeah. I have played male characters. I have played female characters. I have played robots. I have played rabbits. I have played, it doesn't
Goats.
matter. It's just. Interestingly, I was thinking about that. I've never played a goat in a game.
That's just wrong.
But
Yeah.
well, because you play games to be something other than what you are.
Oh, okay. Point. Yeah, you're a goat in real life. Yeah, I forgot about that.
So it doesn't make a difference to me. I do agree, though. I think there are certain assumptions. I think there is a sad fact that people are now afraid to step outside their box because they're worried that people are going to make assumptions. I mean, the Captain America and the Winter Soldier, everyone was complaining that they didn't just make the characters gay, and they were like, it is possible for there to be platonic bromances. Like, relax.
Yeah, I don't get what this whole movement started from, but it's like, yeah, the whole insertion of homosexual characters into every possible form of literature and medium that ever existed, including, previously established ones like Lord of the Rings, where everybody is shipping Samwise Gamgee and Frodo Baggins, and I'm just kind of like, Jesus God, man,
I mean,
please.
It's always been done as a joke since the movies came out, but
yeah, well, but as a joke is one thing, but people are taking this shit seriously now, like trying to quote passages and twist them in ways to say, like, to suggest, like, see, he was really secretly is this gay romance? Really, it was,
which is really a problem because if you want to fight toxic masculinity, then allowing platonic male friendships is really important.
Yeah.
And we seem to be moving away from the things that we said we wanted, which is a shame.
Yeah. It used to be if you were too friendly with another guy, it would be, the guys, the alpha males calling you gay. Now it's breathless shippers from the bushes looking at you and saying, go on, kiss him. We're just bros.
Put your hands closer to him.
But the overall effect is the same, I think.
Now get him to take his shoe off.
It's like, I remember when Philadelphia came out, it was considered groundbreaking because people didn't talk about homosexuality and they didn't talk about AIDS. It was considered a huge deal. And now Tom Hanks said, I would never do it because I'm not really gay.
Okay, I mean, that goes into something I've mentioned on Week in Geek more than once. It's like, back in the comic book days, when comic books were good, a character from Alpha Flight, North Star, came out as gay. And I remember the comic book because my friend worked in the comic book store and he pointed it out to me. He said, hey, did you see that North Star is gay? And I said, what? We went and we read the issue and I was like, oh. And at the time it was novel because this was back in, I don't know, 98, I want to say. Something like that, 96. I don't remember. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah,
you can find it.
We can use it.
Yeah, we can. So yeah, look up North Star came out gay in what issue? In what time? But the deal is, it's like, it was novel at the time because it was so different, but it didn't like affect my perception of the character. I'm like, well, he's still a cool character or whatever. And we went on. It didn't change anything. But then it's like
19
every single character came out as gay after 2000 for some reason.
1992 Alpha Flight issue 106.
There you go. 1992. Jesus Christ, that was a long time ago. That was like over 30 years ago. And it was
Yeah.
It's
it was special and different, but now it's like it ain't special and you know, like if Thor suddenly decided, you know, one day it's kind of like all of a sudden he's like, well, you know, really I fancied men. I've dallied because, you know, I'm a god, I live forever and all this kind of thing. And why not pick the opposite fruit for a little
and then
while?
Loki pops up to one up him saying, I like horses.
Yeah.
I know
he
all
does
the
in the
people,
college.
all the people that complained he was bisexual in the series. I was like, actually, we haven't even
Loki's
gotten
whatever.
we haven't even
Yeah.
gotten to the horses yet. He's a god of chaos. What did you expect?
Yeah. It's like, yeah, he's had horses, hell, and what is it, Garm? The dog? Or was
Yeah.
it something? Or no, Fenrir. Fenrir
was
is Loki's
child,
offspring.
wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah.
He had a lot of
I,
animals.
Yeah, lots of animals.
Yeah.
Worrying.
Yes.
What I like a new trend that I've seen where it isn't like everyone is I'm gay really loud everywhere all the time, but where it's just there, normal, in the background, uncommented.
Yeah.
We still watch cartoons in this house. Don't judge. And in the Loud House, his best friend's parents is a gay couple. One of his sisters is gay, but it's never made into a big thing, and I like it like that.
Yeah. It's just like, you know, my trans girlfriend didn't walk around telling people she was trans. She just said, I'm a woman or I'm a girl. You know, and that was all there was to it.
You'll never get to be a character in a BioWare RPG with that attitude.
Yeah, I know. It's or God, Dragon Age Veilguard. Oh my God, I can't believe that they actually approved. That was the worst character. I mean, not only was that character bad as far as what she said and her dialogue, but the character itself was ugly as fuck, man. She is. I mean, just like no, I mean, seriously, it's like you can't look at that character and go like, there's something attractive about it. And you're supposed to be able to romance this person. I'm kind of like, get the no.
Maybe you just like muscle mummies, especially when they have horns to hold on to.
I love muscle mommies. I don't like whatever that is. I love muscle mommies. No, seriously, it's like you know, it's
if
one of
we're
my
on muscle mummies, we've probably exhausted the topic.
We may have. I don't know, but I mean, I guess basically the whole deal boils down to: can games be considered therapeutic? I mean, in a way, they're more cathartic than therapeutic. I mean, yes, it's a good way of getting a little bit of stress off, like a stress valve for, you know, if you've had a shitty week and you want to go hack up some orcs, or you feel powerless and you didn't get the promotion that you wanted, so you manipulate things in Vampire to, you know, ascend the ranks to become Archon or something else. But as far as like working out seriously deep issues, that's not your GM's job. That's not the other player's job, and it's not their job to work around your issues either. It's kind of like you deal with them or you don't, or, you know, you find something else to do, or don't be surprised when they ask you not to come back.
Yeah.
Goat, have you got any summary comment?
I don't know. I feel like I've talked way too much already. So,
But you're an expert.
No, that's actually kind of my whole point, is that even the doctors aren't experts, so therefore we definitely shouldn't expect gamers to be. So I literally, when I was in college getting one of my master's degrees is in mental health counseling. And they spent the entire time I was getting that degree, until I changed colleges because it was bullshit, saying over and over again, you know, therapy really isn't a science. It's really more of an art. So when that's the attitude with the actual therapists, you really should not be expecting other people, because it's bad for them. It not only are they likely to screw you up more, but it's likely to screw them up. And it's just, I mean, I think catharsis is a much better term. I'm hesitant to even use the word therapeutic, because I think that's another word we're overusing like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And it puts a level of responsibility on people that I don't think is fair. I mean, imagine if you sat down with your family to play Monopoly, or insert other family board game here.
Oh yeah.
And we had the same outlook as we do with role-playing games. Like, and role-playing games are a board game. You know, they're an expensive,
They're a shared experience. Yeah.
way to, form bonds with people.
Yeah, I don't think you drag out your game of Zombicide to, work out some deep-seated issues. I mean, it's kind of like, nah, you just showed up here to, kill a bunch of zombies on a board and accomplish a goal.
Yeah, just blow off some steam.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not fair to anyone, and it's not good for anyone. Don't do it. There's my expert advice. Don't do it.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side, and this is something I think kind of can still go hand in hand. There are video game TTRPGs that maybe won't necessarily help you work through anything, but they'll definitely, if they're done right, will give you some new perspectives and some new ideas. And I cite two in particular that deeply affected me. The first one is Soma, which it's a horror game, but it's also like it's got a lot of thought on what is consciousness, where does it reside, and are we still us even if we are copied, or are we just multiple instances of ourselves? Do we have a soul? This kind of thing.
Yeah, it's very much like the measure of what makes humanity too, right?
Exactly. And then there was Cyberpunk 2077, which, the whole thing with Johnny Silverhand himself was just kind of like, there's actually one point where the character, where V is actually questioning Johnny Silverhand about it, and Johnny's just kind of like, what, am I really me, or am I dead, or does this still make me, and all this kind of thing. It's just stuff like that is really good. It's thought provoking. It kind of goes beyond its plain source material into some much deeper thought, and I really like stuff like that engages you and brings you out. It'd be great to be able to do stuff like that in a TTRPG, but man, leveraging that kind of storytelling power in a game where you've got multiple people eating Doritos and and asking you, what's this guy's AC?
And probably drinking heavily, depending on the game.
Yeah, depending, it's hard to get that. But
that's one of the other things that makes the whole idea so dangerous to me, is so many people are usually on mind-altering substances during a lot of games.
Well, I mean, at the very least, caffeine. Most of my friends don't do drugs, but we do lots of copious amounts of caffeine.
Yeah, it's I don't know why we can't just, games are games and movies are movies and mental health is mental health and politics are politics.
And Sigmund Freud, who has already been discredited in the mental health field, did say, it's like sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
Yep.
So, anyway.
Sometimes it's a severed burning penis.
Yes. All right, everybody. Well, I think we pretty well exhausted the topic. I don't know that we necessarily got anything resolved, other than maybe it's like, using games as therapy. Maybe don't do it. Don't do it. And other than that, well,
I mean, I think that was the most important thing to accomplish in my mind. So
yeah,
don't do that.
Don't do that. Yeah,
they're fun and cathartic, but they're not therapy. Don't try to make them therapy. Don't make your games mods your therapist. Don't make your fellow players your therapists.
Yes. Don't deliberately try to create situations to mess with your players either. I would say, just like if the guy at the table has a thing about spiders or dead bodies or whatever like that, don't just fill your game with it just to fuck with them, because that's a dick move anyway.
Well, I mean, Like I said, it's more about what other players do than anything. Though I do want to make very clear. So my thing is parasites. I have the screaming heebie-jeebies. Like, I get literally nauseous just thinking about it too much.
I know. I wish you hadn't brought it up because now I have these mental images of bed bugs and fleas and shit, and that makes my skin itch.
I have run 2 separate games that involved people getting infested by things internally, and ran them despite the fact that I was trying really hard not to throw up the entire game. So it is not like I am just hard on my players.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I mean, you got to be kind to yourself too, as a GM and as a player and as a person.
Yeah, I think of it more as, if I expect them to deal, I'm trying to remember what the term is, but I'm having a brain spaz. If I expect them to at least be able to be in a room with someone saying the word of something that makes them squeamish, I need to be able to do the same thing.
Well, all right. Okay. So anyway, we got another show tonight at 7. So y'all tune in. It won't be a Dungeons and Discussions. It'll just be a Tuesday with Geeks. But usually we have fun. I still want to try to pull Grim into one of these nights, but I know he's a busy guy. So
yes.
Tune in at 7 p.m. tonight, and we'll see you then. And otherwise, y'all take care. Have a great week in Geek.
Happy headbutting.
Look! The Dungeons and Dragons ride!